My parents skipped my award and left a note, just a trophy, so I left them a parting gift that drove them to their knees begging me for help. Hi, I'm Dana. At my award ceremony, the biggest night of my life, my parents didn't show up. They just left a note on the kitchen counter, just a trophy. That night, something inside me broke. But what followed shattered so much more: secrets, betrayals, a lifetime of sacrifices nobody ever asked for but always expected. What happens when the daughter they took for granted finally walks away and cancels everything they counted on? You think the note was bad? Trust me, it was just the beginning. The door creaked open into a house that felt colder than the night outside. I stepped in. The polished wooden floor muffled my steps. The award plaque felt heavier in my hand with every breath I took. Faint traces of spring clung to the air, cut grass, damp earth. But inside, it was just silence. No balloons, no cheers, not even a half-hearted good job echoing from upstairs. I shut the door softly behind me and paused, listening for any hint of life. Nothing. The house, so familiar, suddenly felt foreign. I walked into the kitchen where the counter was cluttered with yesterday's mail and an empty cereal bowl abandoned like an afterthought. That's when I saw it, a crumpled scrap of paper lying in the center of the counter, weighed down by a half-empty salt shaker. I moved closer, my heart thrumming in my chest for reasons I couldn't name yet. Scrawled across it in quick, lazy handwriting were 3 words, just a trophy. I froze for a full minute, maybe longer. I stood there staring at it like it might change if I blinked hard enough. The plaque, still clutched in my hand, pressed against my ribs. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the edges of my vision tightened. No decorations, no card, no "we're proud of you." Just that note, 3 words that gutted me deeper than 1,000 insults ever could. I set the plaque down carefully on the counter next to the note. It made a small, hollow sound against the laminate, a sound that seemed too loud in the heavy silence. I straightened, looking around as if expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Surprise!" But there was only the steady tick of the kitchen clock, indifferent to the small disaster it was witnessing. Maybe they forgot. Maybe something happened, an emergency. Maybe I knew better. I had always known better. For a moment, I tried to conjure a reason, any reason, why my own family wouldn't be here to celebrate one of the biggest achievements of my life. I thought about when I won the regional spelling bee in middle school, how they left a note taped to the fridge, dinner in the oven. No congratulations. No "we're proud of you." I thought about my high school art exhibit, the way Mom said, maybe next time they'll pick a real artist, when I showed her the invitation. I thought about the scholarships, the internships, the nights I stayed up crying into my pillow because I had nobody to share my victories with. Not really. They always made sure I knew. My accomplishments were inconvenient, my successes invisible unless they could brag about them to their friends. Tonight wasn't new. It was just the first time I couldn't lie to myself about it anymore. My phone buzzed against my hip, breaking my spiral of thought. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a notification from my university: "Congratulations to all our graduates and award recipients. Celebrate this important milestone with the people who love and support you." I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound that scraped my throat raw. It sounded so ridiculous, so naive. The people who love and support you. I didn't even bother opening the email fully. I locked the screen and shoved the phone back into my pocket, feeling the weight of it like another anchor dragging me down. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, my hands shaking just enough to slosh a little over the rim. I drank it down quickly, trying to wash away the bitter taste crawling up my throat. The kitchen clock ticked on, oblivious. I turned off the light and made my way down the hallway to my bedroom, the award plaque still tucked awkwardly under my arm. The house was dim, bathed in the fading lavender light of early evening. Every step I took felt heavier, more permanent, like I was walking away from something I couldn't name yet. I paused at my bedroom door, glancing back one last time. The living room sat dark and empty. The kitchen counter gleamed under the faint light from the street lamp outside, casting a ghostly glow over the crumpled note. Just a trophy. The words echoed in my head as I pushed open my door and stepped inside. I set the plaque down on my desk slowly, carefully, almost as if it were something sacred that the rest of the world had carelessly overlooked. My fingertips lingered on the polished wooden frame for a few extra seconds before I finally let go. Then I dropped heavily onto the edge of my bed. The old mattress let out a tired, sympathetic groan beneath me. I stared at that plaque for what felt like hours, searching the gleaming engraved letters for some shred of meaning, but all I found was emptiness. The ache in my chest wasn't a sudden stab. It was dull, relentless, corrosive, like acid dripping steadily onto a rope that had already been fraying for years. I used to believe my family would notice me eventually, I whispered to the silent walls. That night, something inside me finally shattered. The night dragged on, thick and unforgiving. I lay back on the bed, staring up at a ceiling that dissolved into darkness. I stayed like that for a long time, letting the silence seep into my bones. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once and fell quiet again. The world went still. The award plaque sat untouched on the desk, its presence quiet but accusing, like it knew exactly what it represented, and what it didn't. I closed my eyes, but the weight in my chest refused to ease. Instead, another memory slipped in uninvited, the way old scars always itch when you're already hurting. A week earlier, the backyard had been alive in a way our house never was for me. The bass from the speakers pounded against the walls, rattling my window pane. Strings of lights draped across the trees threw shifting, colored webs over the lawn. Wesley's party wasn't just a party, it was a production. Food trucks idled along the curb, their neon signs pulsing like lures. A professional DJ worked the patio booth, whipping the crowd into a frenzy. A drone hummed overhead, filming every laughing face, every sloppy hug, every shouted congratulations. Through the thin curtains of my bedroom, I watched Mom, Dorothy, flit around like she was hosting the Oscars, balancing a tray of custom cupcakes in her perfectly manicured hands. Each one was crowned with a tiny, edible Wesley face molded from fondant, smirking exactly the way he always did in real life. Dad manned the grill like it was the 4th of July, flipping burgers and ribs with theatrical flair, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny. Guests toasted Wesley, patted him on the back, snapped selfies with him as if being near him would somehow transfer his good fortune onto them. And me? I wasn't invited. I wasn't even acknowledged. I sat at my desk pretending to work, pretending not to hear the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, pretending it didn't matter. It wasn't the first time. Growing up, Wesley was the sun, and I was just a planet forced to orbit him unnoticed. Every birthday of his was an event, a blowout party, banners hung across the living room, gifts piled high. For mine, if they remembered, it was a leftover cake from the grocery store and a distracted happy birthday over breakfast. When Wesley barely passed his finals in high school, there was a dinner out complete with a custom-made cake shaped like a graduation cap. When I graduated summa cum laude from university, Mom said, "That's nice, honey," without even looking up from her phone. As a child, I learned quickly that asking for attention was a sin. If I asked for help with homework, I was being difficult. If I asked for space to paint, to write, to breathe, I was starting drama. Wesley always needed the room to revolve around him, and it always did. The more I tried to matter, the more invisible I became. Lying there in the dark, the echoes of Wesley's party still vivid in my mind, I felt the old hurt twisting itself tighter around my ribs. They had celebrated him like he won the Nobel Prize. They left me a crumpled note and an empty house. Earlier today, if I could even call it that, it already felt like a lifetime ago. I'd found the courage to ask Mom, standing there in the kitchen after my ceremony, clutching my plaque like a lifeline. "Did no one want to do anything for me?" I'd asked, voice carefully neutral, like I wasn't begging for something as simple as being seen. She hadn't even looked up from sorting the mail. Without missing a beat, Dorothy said, "You're not really the celebrating type, are you?" As if that was a compliment. As if her indifference was an act of mercy. I remembered standing there feeling like an idiot, feeling like a child again, foolish for needing anything at all. Her words stung, not because they were sharp, but because they were so thoughtless, so casual, like my existence didn't warrant more than a shrug. I turned onto my side, the bedsheets cool against my skin. The plaque on the desk gleamed dully in the faint light spilling in from the street lamp outside. I should have known. I did know. But there's a difference between knowing something in your head and feeling it crack open in your chest. I thought about every time I had clapped for Wesley, cheered for his games, celebrated his smallest victories, even when he didn't notice. I thought about all the times I sat quietly with my own wins, waiting for someone to care, and when no one did, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed an indifferent 1:17 a.m., its icy blue numbers cutting through the dark like a silent accusation. I dragged the blanket higher over my shoulders even though the room wasn't cold, the chill was deeper than skin. Sleep had become a stranger on nights like this, nights when the ache inside me roared so loudly it drowned out every other sound. I lay motionless, eyes fixed on the barely visible seams of the ceiling, watching them blur and sharpen as my mind replayed a lifetime of moments that all carried the same quiet message: you don't matter enough to notice. For what felt like hours, I drifted through memories that used to sting but now only left scar tissue. Birthdays where the cake was always Wesley's favorite flavor. School events where the camera lens never swiveled toward me. Report cards posted on the fridge for exactly one day before Wesley's latest trophy took their place. All of it wrapped in the same gentle excuse: we're just giving you space, honey. You're so independent. Independence, I now understood, was the polite word they used for invisibility. And in that motionless dark, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no thunderclap, no sudden blaze of anger. It was quieter, colder, and far more irreversible. A part of me calcified. The soft, hopeful part that still scanned doorways for proud smiles finally gave up and turned to stone. They would never throw me a party with food trucks and drones. They would never bake cupcakes with my face on them, no matter how many awards I stacked on my desk. Because I wasn't the son who made them look good. I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who never needed anything, so they never gave me anything. I existed to make Wesley's light look brighter by absorbing all the shadows myself. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes until I saw sparks, refusing to let the tears come. I was tired of watering a garden that never bloomed for me. I was tired of performing gratitude for scraps. I was done pretending silence was strength when all it had ever done was erase me, one uncelebrated year at a time. That was the exact moment I understood: grace isn't always quiet. Sometimes grace is the sound of a door closing behind you forever. The clock flicked to 2:04 a.m. when I finally pushed myself upright. The room carried the faint, cloying ghost of lavender from a candle I'd bought months ago in some pathetic attempt at self-soothing, a candle I'd never once bothered to light. The mockery of it made me smile, small and bitter. I lowered my bare feet to the frigid hardwood floor and sat there for a long minute, palms open on my thighs, feeling the full weight of everything I had carried alone for so long. It was heavier than any duffel bag, heavier than any trophy or plaque, and I was finally ready to set it down. No one was going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly see me. No one was going to knock on my door with apologies or explanations or the love they'd withheld for 18 years. That fairy tale had died somewhere between the fondant Wesley faces and the drone footage that would never include me in the frame. I moved like a ghost through my own bedroom, careful not to let the floorboards betray me even though the rest of the house slept the deep, untroubled sleep of people who had never once questioned their worth. My old duffel bag, the one I'd packed with trembling excitement the first time I left for college, believing distance might finally make them miss me, was folded flat beneath the bed, coated in a thin layer of dust that spoke of how little I'd needed it since. I dragged it out by one strap. The zipper rasped open like a warning that sounded too loud in the suffocating quiet, but no one stirred. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to see to know what belonged to me and what never really had. I worked by the pale glow of the clock and the sliver of streetlight that slipped through the blinds, folding clothes with the mechanical calm of someone performing a ritual they'd rehearsed in their head 1,000 times without ever admitting it. Jeans. Hoodies. The few books that had kept me sane. The battered laptop that held every essay, every scholarship application, every private journal entry screaming the things I'd never said out loud. Every item that went into the bag felt like evidence that I had survived anyway, evidence that I had built a life in the margins they'd left for me. I paused only once, when my fingers brushed the corner of the very first award I'd ever won, the one that had started all of this. I left it on the desk next to the newest plaque. Let them sit there together, two bookends holding up exactly nothing. When the bag was full, I zipped it closed with deliberate slowness, the sound final and clean. I stood in the middle of the room that had never truly been mine and took one last look around, at the unlit candle, at the untouched trophies, at the bed still dented from where I'd lain awake deciding who I was allowed to become. Then I slung the strap over my shoulder, the weight of it familiar and righteous, and walked toward the door without looking back. The house didn't creak in protest. The hallway didn't try to hold me. Even the air seemed to part, as if it, too, had been waiting for me to leave. I was done waiting for them to choose me. From now on, I was choosing myself. I packed methodically, my laptop, charger, and the degree I fought for without a single congratulatory handshake from my parents, the envelope of cash I'd saved from tutoring sessions and late-night shifts at the campus library, jeans, 2 sweaters, the comfortable sneakers I bought last Black Friday. While everyone else splurged on flat-screen TVs, I left behind anything that felt like a chain, yearbooks, gifts I never asked for but received anyway, like someone had picked up whatever was nearest to the checkout line. No notes, no farewell, just movement. Downstairs, the house was bathed in dim shadows. I stood at the threshold of the living room for a moment, scanning the furniture, the family photos that lined the mantel. None of them featured me alone. I was background noise there too, wedged into the corners, an afterthought. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder and turned the doorknob slowly. The latch gave way with a reluctant click. Stepping outside, the crisp air wrapped around me like a second skin. A few stars winked through the thinning clouds. The driveway stretched before me, and beyond it, a different life. I paused, one hand resting lightly on the frame of the door. No one stirred upstairs. No silhouettes at the windows. No calls trailing after me asking where I was going. They wouldn't even know I'd left until morning, if they noticed at all. I closed the door without a sound. The 30-minute drive to the motel felt both impossibly long and brutally short. The roads were mostly empty, the occasional truck humming by in the opposite lane. The radio played low, a classic rock station half lost to static, but I didn't turn it off. It was better than sitting alone with the buzz of my own heartbeat. The motel was one of those places you blink and miss on the highway, a squat one-story building with peeling paint and a neon vacancy sign that flickered weakly against the night. Inside, the clerk barely looked up from his newspaper as I slid my ID across the counter. He handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a plastic card, and mumbled something about free coffee in the morning. I nodded, tucking the key into my jacket pocket. The room was nothing special: bed, dresser, tiny bathroom, faded wallpaper peeling slightly at the corners. But when I stepped inside and turned the lock behind me, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: relief. No invisible expectations hanging in the air. No tightrope to walk between being too much and never enough. Just 4 walls, a sagging mattress, and a silence that didn't judge me. I dropped the duffel bag on the bed and sat down beside it. My body ached in ways I hadn't noticed before, from holding it all together, from carrying so much alone. Pulling out my laptop, I flipped it open and created a new document. At the top, I typed the title without hesitation: Everything They Don't Know I Paid For. And then the list began. Wesley's laptop when he spilled soda on it 2 years ago and never told anyone. Dad's overdue Visa bill I paid off in secret so he wouldn't lose his credit line. The water bill Mom forgot about during that rough winter when we almost had the pipes freeze. My own textbooks. My own gas money. The groceries that mysteriously refilled the pantry when someone must have remembered to shop. Line after line poured out of me, every silent bailout, every invisible act of love they never noticed or, worse, never thought to ask where it came from. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. It wasn't just the money. It was the emotional math I had been doing for years, calculating what parts of myself to suppress just to keep the peace. And for what? Not a party, not even a hug, just a note on the counter and a shrug that told me all I needed to know. My hands hovered over the keyboard as a new thought began to crystallize, sharper than any sadness. This wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about making them hurt the way I had been hurt. It was about making sure the weight they so casually placed on my shoulders stayed off for good, because I was done. Done carrying them. Done patching up holes they refused to see. Done sacrificing my sanity for scraps of affection. I closed the laptop softly, like tucking in a child. 3 days, I thought. 3 days, and everything they leaned on would vanish, not because I wanted revenge, but because survival sometimes looks like not catching a falling knife. Morning seeped into the motel room through the thin curtains, painting the faded carpet in stripes of dull light. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't feel tired. It was a different kind of energy humming under my skin, focused, deliberate, the kind you find when you finally realize no one's coming to save you. Sitting at the small wooden desk by the window, I powered up my laptop. It took a few seconds for the screen to flicker to life, but once it did, I wasted no time. My fingers moved with a calmness that felt foreign at first, then natural. One by one, I logged into every account that tethered me to that house. First, the family phone plan. I scrolled down, clicked Manage Lines, and deactivated each one except mine. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to remove these users? They will lose service immediately. I clicked yes without hesitation. Next, the streaming services, Spotify tied to Wesley's email, Netflix still billed to my card, even the cloud storage account my parents dumped every blurry family photo into. One by one, cancel, cancel, cancel. Then the utilities. I opened the water company portal, the electric company, the garbage disposal service, all still under my name because at some point it had been easier for me to manage it than to listen to them complain. One click at a time, I dismantled the invisible safety net they never even knew existed. With every confirmation email that pinged into my inbox, a small knot in my chest loosened, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because for the first time, I wasn't going to suffer for them. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the stiff motel chair, staring at the ceiling as if the answers were written there. It was still early, the muggy June air already made the small room feel stuffy. I opened the window slightly, letting in a weak breeze that smelled faintly of asphalt and cut grass. And then the phone started buzzing. At first it was just one notification, then another and another. Wesley, bro, WTF? Where's my Spotify? Wesley again, my phone's dead, man. I need it for work. Mom, Dorothy, sent a longer message. Why is my stylist saying payment failed? Dana, call me now. Another one from Dad, the lights are acting weird. Did you forget to pay again? I watched the messages roll in, a steady stream of panic disguised as accusations. The chaos I'd carried silently for years was now crashing down around them, and they were scrambling, desperate to find the net that had always caught them before they even realized they were falling. But this time, there was no net. Not anymore. Dorothy sent another message, this one laced with guilt so thick it nearly made me laugh. You're hurting everyone. You always take things so personally. This isn't what family does to each other. It was almost impressive how quickly they shifted from confusion to blame. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay. Not once did anyone say we're sorry. Instead, it was my fault for removing support they never thanked me for. It was my fault for letting them feel even a fraction of the insecurity I'd lived with every day. I put the phone down on the desk, letting it buzz unanswered. The next barrage came faster. Wesley sending nothing but angry emojis. Dad firing off messages like bullets, unbelievable. Ungrateful. You'll regret this when we're gone. And Dorothy, the master of emotional manipulation, trying every key on the broken piano of our relationship. I didn't mean what I said. You know we love you deep down. You're being selfish after everything we've done for you. Selfish. That word echoed in my mind, bitter and absurd. If survival was selfish, then yes, I was finally guilty. I opened the family group chat just long enough to see the train wreck unfolding. Wesley, where TF is Dana? Dad, she's punishing us. Typical. Dorothy, don't engage. She wants attention. I laughed quietly, a sound more disbelief than amusement. They truly believed that cutting the leash they'd tied around my neck was about attention. They didn't see that I wasn't standing in the doorway waiting to be noticed anymore. I was already halfway down the road, and they were arguing with my shadow. Without another glance, I muted the group chat and blocked notifications from their numbers. No arguments, no explanations, no more wasted words on people who only listened when something was missing from their plates. Their chaos wasn't my responsibility anymore. Their hunger wasn't mine to feed. Their darkness wasn't mine to brighten. I glanced around the room again, the peeling wallpaper, the ancient TV perched on a particle board dresser, the thin curtain struggling to block out the rising sun. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comfortable. But it was mine. As I powered down my phone for the night, I whispered into the stillness, more to myself than to anyone else, they're finally feeling the weight I've been carrying alone for years, and I was just getting started. The next morning, the air inside the motel room was thick, heavy with the kind of humidity that made the walls feel closer than they were. I swung my legs off the bed and rubbed the back of my neck, letting the reality settle into my bones. This was my life now, stripped down, raw, mine to rebuild. The laptop still sat on the nightstand, the screen dark. I reached for it, my fingers steady. There were no doubts clouding my mind anymore, no second guessing. I powered it on, and while it booted, I grabbed a bottle of water from the tiny motel fridge and took a sip, savoring the small luxury of doing something just for myself. When the email notification popped up, I saw it immediately. The subject line bold and almost shining through the gloom, offer extended, academic center manager position. My heart skipped once, twice, then thudded into a new rhythm. I clicked it open. It wasn't just an offer, it was a door, a real door. Full-time benefits, a salary that wouldn't leave me scraping by, and my own office at the new center they were opening 2 towns over. They wanted me, not as a backup, not as a favor, not because it was convenient. They saw what I had built with my students, the quiet success I had nurtured in a place no one else cared to look. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, letting the reality of it wash over me. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to ask permission. All I had to do was say yes. I hit reply without a second thought, thank you for the opportunity. I accept the offer with enthusiasm and look forward to contributing to the success of the new center. Click send. The heaviness on my chest lifted just a fraction, not enough to fly, but enough to breathe a little easier. By noon, I had packed up what little I had brought to the motel. I booked a short-term rental closer to the center, a modest 1-bedroom apartment with peeling linoleum floors and a tiny kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it was a start. It was enough. I loaded my duffel bag into the back of a rideshare, exchanging polite small talk with the driver while my mind spun plans like threads. Furniture to buy, utilities to set up, routes to memorize. Halfway to the new place, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar but local. I almost let it go to voicemail, almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello, I answered cautiously. No voice answered back, just a click, then a mechanical voice from the recording, you have received a certified letter. Please check your front desk reception. Confused, I furrowed my brow but thanked the recording anyway. Once I reached the rental office, the front desk clerk handed me a slightly crumpled envelope, no return address, just my name scrawled in messy handwriting. Dorothy, of course. Back in the new apartment, surrounded by bare walls and possibility, I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. The letter was a patchwork of contradictions, half apology, half blame. Words like, we didn't mean to hurt you. You've always been independent. You never needed much. We were under a lot of stress. It wasn't personal. Family is about forgiveness. No real ownership, no real regret, just another attempt to twist the blade a little softer, to reframe the years of neglect as an accident instead of a choice. I let the letter drop to the floor. It didn't deserve to be framed, to be mourned. It was just another brick in the wall they had spent a lifetime building between us. I stood up slowly, letting the ache in my joints remind me how long I had sat still for them. No more, I muttered under my breath, tossing the letter into the small trash can. They weren't sorry. They were scared of losing their scapegoat, their silent labor, their fallback plan. Scared that without me, the cracks in the foundation they ignored for decades would finally split open and swallow them whole. I checked my email again. The confirmation for my lease had arrived. Move-in day was tomorrow. Tonight would be my last night in the motel. Tonight, I closed a chapter they still hadn't realized was over. As the late afternoon sun dipped low, throwing golden streaks across the stained carpet, I packed my bag again, lighter this time, less burdened. Locking the motel door behind me, I slung my duffel over one shoulder and smiled to myself. They thought they could guilt me back, I whispered. They were wrong. The heavy motel door shut behind me for the last time, and I didn't look back. The sun blazed overhead, pressing down like a dare. I squared my shoulders against it, against all of it, and moved forward into my new life, into a new place where no one knew my name unless I chose to tell them. The apartment wasn't much: cracked tile floors, beige walls screaming for a fresh coat of paint, and a faint smell of paint thinner that clung to the air. But it was clean. It was quiet. It was mine. I spent the afternoon unpacking what little I owned: a few worn books, my laptop, a second-hand coffee maker. Piece by piece, I was building a life that no longer required permission. It was almost evening when I plugged my laptop into the wall and logged into my backup email account. I wasn't sure what made me check it: curiosity, maybe, or a premonition. The inbox was flooded. At first I thought it was junk mail, but then I saw the subject lines: "Family is everything. Betrayal cuts deepest. You reap what you sow." I opened one post link hesitantly, and there it was, a public Facebook rant, courtesy of Dorothy. Vague enough not to name me, but sharp enough that anyone with half a brain would know exactly who she meant. Some people forget where they come from. They think success means cutting ties with the people who sacrificed everything for them. Shameful. Underneath, comments bloomed like weeds: "Stay strong, Dorothy. She'll regret it one day. Kids these days are so selfish." Extended family chimed in: aunts, cousins, neighbors who once handed me Halloween candy and now turned their backs without a second thought. I clicked through more posts. Wesley too had taken to Instagram, posting blurry photos of our old backyard with captions like "Family ain't disposable" and "Some people just ain't built right." The worst part wasn't their words. It was how quickly strangers, people who hadn't lifted a finger for me in years, lapped them up like gospel. I sat back in the creaky chair, the laptop humming quietly on my desk. My chest tightened, not with grief, but with a kind of cold fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. They could paint whatever picture they wanted. It didn't make it real. I reached for my water bottle when another notification dinged: a new email, this time sent to my work address. My stomach dropped the second I saw the sender's name: Wesley. I opened it with slow, deliberate fingers. "You better fix this," the email said. "I know where you work." No punctuation. No pleasantries, just a threat, thinly veiled but crystal clear. For a moment, I couldn't move, not because I was scared, not exactly, because I knew what this meant. They weren't just trying to guilt me back anymore. They were choosing war. Slowly, methodically, I forwarded the email to my supervisor, adding a simple note: "Potential security concern, please advise." I didn't want drama. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to do my job, live my life, and be left alone. But if they were going to bring the fight to my doorstep, I wasn't about to stand there and let them. My supervisor, kind but firm, replied within minutes: "We'll increase security measures immediately. Thank you for letting us know." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I wasn't alone here. Not anymore. The next morning, the building manager installed a keypad lock on the staff entrance. Cameras were checked. Policies were reviewed. It was subtle but solid, like laying bricks against an incoming storm. I stood by my office window, watching the parking lot shimmer under the summer heat, and realized I wasn't afraid, not of Wesley, not of Dorothy, not of the lies they were weaving around me like spiderwebs. This wasn't family anymore. This was survival. And survival meant drawing lines, clear, hard, permanent. Inside my chest, something old and heavy cracked loose: not sadness, not guilt, but freedom. Next time they cross the line, I thought, staring at my reflection in the glass, there won't be another warning. I turned from the window, my office door clicking shut behind me. Let them come. I was ready. The sky had darkened to a heavy steel, the air thick and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I tossed my keys onto the small table by the door and kicked off my shoes, the tile cool against my bare feet. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, not quite here yet, but close enough that the windows rattled faintly in warning. I was just about to heat up leftovers when my phone buzzed violently against the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second, every instinct screaming at me to ignore it. But a deeper instinct, the one honed by years of dealing with them, told me exactly who it was. I answered without a word. Finally, Wesley's voice snarled into my ear. "Took you long enough to stop hiding." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. "You're a real piece of work, you know that," he spat. "You think you're better than us now? You think you can just walk away like you never owed us anything?" I leaned back against the kitchen counter, feeling the cool stone bite into my palms. I could almost see him, pacing, red-faced, wild-eyed, painting himself as the victim in a story he wrote himself. "You ruined everything," he barked. "Mom's a wreck because of you. You got people looking at us like we're trash." There it was, not guilt, not regret, just embarrassment, just wounded pride. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it, sobbing, loud, theatrical, dragging on the edges of his words like background noise. "Dorothy." I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me without sinking in. It wasn't real. It was a performance, an old, tired play I'd seen too many times before. Nobody said "I'm sorry." Nobody said "we hurt you." Just accusations like knives tossed blindly into the dark. "You done yet?" I asked, my voice steady, almost bored. There was a pause, like he hadn't expected that, like he was so used to me folding under the weight of their chaos that he didn't know what to do when I didn't. "You're the selfish one," he hissed. "You always have been. Everything we did for you." I let out a soft laugh, not bitter, not cruel, just tired. "No," I said quietly. "You did everything for yourselves, and you used me to clean up the mess." His breath caught on the other end. "Good. You didn't lose me," I continued, voice sharpening like the edge of a blade. "You pushed me away. You chose yourselves every single time. And now you get to live with that." I took a deep breath, feeling the words settle into my bones like steel. "No more money," I said. "No more favors. No more pretending." He tried to interrupt, I heard the sputtering outrage, but I cut through it cleanly. "And unless you can come to me with real apologies, not crocodile tears, not guilt trips, you get no access to me. None." The storm outside cracked open then, a flash of lightning illuminating my small kitchen for a split second. I didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the thunder. I wasn't afraid of them. Wesley started shouting again, some mix of curse words, blame, and rage. I didn't listen. I ended the call mid-sentence, my thumb steady as I blocked the number. Then I blocked Dorothy. Then every other number tied to that sinking ship I used to call family. It wasn't hate that fueled me. It was survival. It was choosing myself, for once, fully, unapologetically. I set the phone down. The room vibrated faintly with the heavy roll of thunder outside. The rain hadn't come yet, but it would. You could feel it in the air, that thick, electric pull. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, feeling more anchored than I had in years. They could cry. They could rage. They could smear my name to anyone who would listen. But they couldn't reach me anymore, because I wasn't standing still, waiting to be dragged back into their chaos. I was walking away. And for the first time truly, they weren't coming with me. Another low rumble shook the windows, and I whispered into the growing storm, my voice steady and sure, "The next time they reach out, it'll be too late." The days after the final call settled into a strange, thick calm, not peaceful exactly, but suspended, like the air before a storm finally breaks. I woke up that morning to a gray, heavy sky pressing against my windows. Springfield's usual buzzing summer had been muted into a humid, suffocating quiet. Coffee in hand, I logged into my email, expecting the usual work updates. Instead, a series of forwarded legal documents blinked back at me. I clicked open the first one, eviction notice filed against the leaseholders of my childhood home, past due utilities, terminated service accounts, frozen credit lines. Everything that had once invisibly stayed afloat because I made sure it did was crumbling fast now. I stared at the screen, feeling a sharp, almost electric pain in my chest, not regret, not even sorrow, but relief. The dominoes had started to fall the moment I stepped away. And now, finally, they were seeing just how much weight I'd been carrying for them all along. A soft knock at my door pulled me out of the moment, just a package delivery. I signed without thinking, my mind still circling around the cascading collapse I wasn't lifting a single finger to stop. By noon, the thick humidity outside broke into a brief, ugly shower. Rain hammered the roof while I worked quietly, emails pinging into my inbox faster than I could read them, utility companies, the county clerk's office, even the landlord's firm, all forwarding me notices about accounts they could no longer reach the primary holder for. They weren't my responsibility anymore. But because my name had once been tied to so many bills, they wanted me to see the wreckage. Message received. I poured another coffee and sat back, letting the documents pile up in unread tabs. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I knew it before I answered. I pressed accept anyway, bracing myself. His voice was thinner than I remembered, rough and unsteady. "Sweetheart," Clifford started, trying to slip into the fatherly tone I hadn't heard in years. We just need a little help to get through this month. You know how it is. Hard times, harder, apparently, when you spend decades burning every bridge you had and pretending they would rebuild themselves. He continued, words tripping over themselves, painting a picture of bad luck, unexpected expenses, misfortune, but never, ever accountability. Not once did he say we were wrong. Not once did he say I'm sorry. It was all about what they needed, what they were owed. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting him fill the silence with desperate, pleading noise. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke, calm, even, unshakable. "I suggest you contact the landlord," I said. "Or a lawyer." He tried again, voice cracking now. "You know we don't have anyone else, baby girl." I hung up mid-sentence, mid-begging, mid-history. I set the phone down gently, like closing the final page of a book I would never reread. The rain outside had eased into a steady drip, the sidewalks glistening under the dull afternoon light. I moved to the window and leaned my forehead against the glass, watching the water slide down in long, lazy streaks. Was it cruel? Maybe. But survival doesn't ask for kindness from the people who abandoned you first. They chose their pride. They chose their negligence. They chose to pretend their hands were clean while expecting mine to stay dirty for them. And I had finally, fully chosen myself. The guilt didn't stick anymore. It slid off me like the rain off the glass. They could rebuild if they wanted. They could start fresh, or they could drown in the mess they made. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet tap of rain against the window, feeling it settle into my bones, not as sadness, but as clean, clear freedom. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It had already passed. And for the first time, I wasn't standing in the wreckage. I was free of it. By the time August rolled around, the sharp, biting heat of midsummer had mellowed into golden evenings. The city slowed down, students out for break, families on vacation, the streets quieter. So was I. I stood in my small apartment, barefoot on the warm wooden floor, surveying what I had built. It wasn't much: a second-hand couch I found on Facebook Marketplace, a desk that wobbled if you leaned too hard, a handful of thrift store plants reaching lazily for the sun. But every inch of it was mine. No framed family portraits adorned my walls. Instead, there were certificates of my students' achievements, snapshots of smiling faces at the center I now managed, kids whose names I remembered because I chose to. I brewed a pot of coffee, humming quietly under my breath. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the smell of freshly cut grass wafted through the open window. Life was simple, steady, good. I was arranging books on a low shelf when the knock came at my door, a soft, uncertain sound. Frowning, I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened it. No one there, just a brown package sitting neatly on the welcome mat. No return address. Curious, I carried it inside and sliced it open with my house key. Inside was a simple frame, a photo of Wesley and me, maybe 7 and 10 years old, grinning with missing teeth and sticky hands from too much candy. He had his arms slung over my shoulders, and I was laughing, head thrown back in carefree joy. Tucked behind the frame was a small note, the handwriting shaky but unmistakable. I didn't know what you were carrying. I do now. I'm sorry, Elle. I sat down hard on the couch, the frame resting in my lap. For a long moment, I just stared at it. The tears that rose weren't for the people they were now. They were for the kids we used to be, the ones who hadn't learned yet that love came with conditions, that loyalty was expected but rarely returned. I set the frame gently on the side table next to a small, healthy succulent. Maybe that was all the closure I'd ever get. Maybe that was enough. Later that week, after a full day at the center, my coworkers invited me out for drinks. I almost said no, old instinct still whispering that belonging wasn't meant for me. But something stronger pushed me to accept. The bar was small, cozy, strings of fairy lights crisscrossing the ceiling. Laughter bubbled easily from our table, inside jokes forming faster than I could keep up. One of the interns toasted to me, sloshing her drink a little as she declared, "To Dana, the only reason half of us aren't flunking out." Everyone laughed, and I did too, genuine and full. I looked around, faces glowing under the lights, easy camaraderie swirling around us, and realized family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who show up when you aren't perfect, the ones who see you, not what you can give them, not how you make them look, but you. And for the first time, I had that. I built it myself. That weekend, feeling oddly light, I decided to try one last time to reconnect with Velma, my aunt. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe wounds had softened. I crafted a short, polite email, no accusations, no emotional minefields, just an olive branch. 2 days later, her reply landed. One line, "Hope you're doing well. Take care." Nothing more. No warmth. No acknowledgement. And just like that, I knew some bridges weren't just burned, they were never meant to be crossed again. And that, too, was a kind of freedom. On the evening of my birthday, I stood on my small balcony, a slice of cake balanced on the railing, a plastic fork in hand. The sun dipped low over the city, bathing the streets in gold and long shadows. I breathed in deep, the smell of late summer, the hum of distant laughter, the quiet click of possibility unfurling around me. I hadn't just survived them. I survived myself. After everything, if there's one thing I could tell the version of me who stayed too long, hoped too hard, and loved without limits, it's this: you don't owe anyone your self-destruction in the name of loyalty. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to survive. You are allowed to thrive. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who teach us how to love ourselves, by refusing to do it first. And that's not a tragedy. It's a beginning. I hope if you're standing at a crossroads right now, you remember, freedom doesn't come from waiting for them to change. It comes from deciding you deserve more, even if you have to walk away to find it.